Emma? Everybody doing all right today? Well, is that loud enough? Is it still loud enough? Unbelievable. All right, we're going to have a lot of folks coming in and out, a lot of different meetings going on. So if y'all would give us just a second, everybody cut off their phones and all that kind of fun stuff. Thank you. We're going to start, while we're handing that out for members of the committee, we're going to start with the Department of Natural Resources, that's easy for me to say, on page 15, and the illustrious commissioner will be joining us and telling us about his department. Welcome. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'll be, if y'all want to follow along tracking sheet, I'll start with our coastal resources at 33-1. Throughout all the divisions, you'll see the increase for the share of the employees' retirement system, so I won't go over those individually, but we are requesting on our funds for merit-based pay adjustments, we are requesting some changes there. This is due to the fact that we've done some merit-based raises in-house. The General Assembly has given our rangers, as you know, for the last 2 years raises, are post-certified. So even though the dollar amount overall does not change, we're asking for some changes in how it's distributed. So I'll start with the coastal resources. Instead of a $13,328, we'd like to reduce that to $9,749. At Department Administration, we'd like to leave it the same at $48,728. Skip Environmental Protection, Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, and go down to Historic Preservation. There we would like to adjust the $5,947 up to $10,528. In our law enforcement section right under that, we would like to have a reduction in that $118,576 to $83,492. And then in Parks and Recreation, we would like to increase the $34,435 figure to $89,492. And then finally, in 33-9 in our wildlife resources, we would like to reduce the $100,871 figure to $80,074. Again, these adjustments still total up to the budget, the governor's recommendation for our entire department, which I believe was around $321,000. We just asked the General Assembly to let us reallocate it in a different way based on raises that have been given to our employees, and this will allow us in our larger divisions where we have a lot of administrative people in these region offices that haven't gotten raises to have the flexibility to give them some merit-based pay increases. That concludes. No, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, good to see you again.
You too.
First and foremost, I want to say, you know, this is my 5th year on this committee, and I can say what an incredible yeoman's job you've done with the budget you've been given. It's good to see that we're actually able to help you out a little bit here. I wanted to ask 2 questions really quick. First, given the fact that this committee under the chairman's leadership was able to give some raises to your post-certified officers, are we finding that we're keeping retention? I know you and I had talked, and having 5 state parks in my district and a lot of rangers, one of our concerns was the lack of retention ability because they go to other law enforcement agencies and get higher pay because during obviously the recession times we weren't able to do that. Are we holding on to our officers now, and is it helping to their morale?
I would would say morale is as high as it's been in a long time, and retention rates are certainly a lot better.
Okay.
So the answer is yes, a
Well,
resounding yes.
That was a concern. The second thing I wanted to ask is I haven't looked in the budget. Do you have any requests in the bond package part of the budget? Because I know we've had to put a lot of issues on hold having to do with our state parks and some necessary upgrades, and I did not see that here in the tracking sheet. So I was wondering.
We have two figures in bond, be bond 89. I don't know if you have it in front of you, for $8,520,000 for major facility improvements and renovations, and then another $2,720,000 for new construction statewide, and the lion's share of that is going to our state parks. Y'all have continually, with the work y'all have done with the budget, to maintain our bond rating, and have been very generous to us through the bonding, which has helped us keep our state parks. I just looked at a figure. Homer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think over the last 6 years, this General Assembly has funded about $47 million in state parks. A good, steady pace for construction. So,
Well, again, I want to make sure you got what you needed, and I didn't see that, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other members of the committee? All right, I've got a few just quickly to clean up kind of questions that I'd love to get your opinion on. We're asking for a $3 million plus on the one-time funds for water-related studies.
that would be Judd.
You want us to hold off and wait
Yep.
to talk to him about that? Okay, let's go to hazardous waste. You got 630,000. You want some of that too? All right.
Hey,
Let's go
one
to
of my favorite things to say when
It's
I answer
yeah.
the phone in the day is you got to talk to Judd at EPD.
Yeah, I never do that. Create new law enforcement under law enforcement and transfer 221 positions from the wildlife resource. You want some of that?
That was, yes, sir, I can answer that one. That was when we created our new law enforcement division this year. The figures stay the same. It has a neutral budget impact. It just puts law enforcement money out of WRD into their law enforcement division.
All right. The question is, has it been so broken for so many years that we just had to do that now? What necessitates that we even need to do that?
Well, the board voted on it. It was a board rule, and we did it this summer. And it was to get all we had post-certified individuals, 4 different training standards, 4 different rules of engagement spread over one division. And they all answered, some of them answered to post-certified individuals, and some answered non-post-certified. And I think for efficiencies in our department, we needed them all answering to one colonel that's post-certified.
All right. And it's your opinion that in the future, that kind of rule change through the board won't cost the state? It'll always be budget neutral?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Judd, you want to be the next contestant?
Mr. Chairman, good to be with you and members of the committee. I guess EPD breaks down into 3 programs here, and I'll run through them if you like. The main EPD program contains the 2 statewide ads that I won't touch on unless there are questions related to it. But then the one-time funds for water-related studies and updates to regional water plans, they're at 33.3. You will remember we did, and this has really been a big deal, I think, for water planning across the state, which was a statewide water plan that that this body passed in 2008. It was anticipated that the plans themselves and the work of those councils would be updated every 5 years. So I guess about 2/3 of these added funds relate to beginning to fund the additional work, mainly around the data side and water quality monitoring and water supply modeling, and also some water demand forecasting work necessary for those update of those plans. And this would be all across the state. And then we've also got, the governor's also recommended some additional funds that we talked to him about related to some targeted additional water studies, depending on where we see some geographic specific needs in the state, particularly in the lower Flint.
Yeah, that's that particular part I was interested in.
Yes, sir.
How do you know that? If you're spending money to do a study because you anticipate it, what makes you look there and for your anticipation?
One thing that makes us look there is we know from a resource standpoint that we are trying to determine some alternatives for some of the use in the Flint. If you go back to this last drought cycle that we came out of, we were seeing some stream flows impacts that bothered us. We believe on some of the data we have right now that there are some alternatives for some of the surface water withdrawals in these lower aquifers, and we need to confirm that if we're going to move forward with some suggestions to this body, for instance, around the Flint River Drought Protection Act and some of those other studies for the future. So we know we need more information there. It's not lost on you, Mr. Chairman, that Florida has also challenged us, and we are some of what we need to do here relates to preparation for that action.
Help me understand that as a relationship if you don't have information just yet. Is that an accurate statement?
We have.
You saw some of the things in the streams that you said were disturbing.
Right.
Some
Sure.
trends.
Sure. We actually have some information. This
Okay.
is about confirming it before we go haul off and make some greater recommendations to this body.
Okay.
For further action. We really want that confirmed.
Gather more information before you make the recommendations. I'm trying to tie into this. Then how do you make the recommendations necessarily on like Senate Bill 213?
Well,
If you don't have all the information.
Sure, absolutely. Well, that 213 isn't a big enchilada.
Okay.
It's a first step, very modest first step that I think we need to do irrespective of any major change to the Flint River Drought Protection Act. Those more significant changes I think are in best case scenario 2 or 3 years out when we've done this kind of work. In addition to some other work we're working on related to for instance, at the Stripling Center on how we might use these lower aquifers and what kind of low drip systems really work there. I mean, you got to kind of bring all that together, and that is not 213. 213 is just an initial step.
All right. Any other questions in regards to those one-time funds? How do you know that's the right amount, by the way?
Well, I think
how come it's not 2.8 million? Is that a bid thing that someone just said it's going to be 3.5 million?
We do know a good bit about the cost of these things. We've got an analog from when the Metro District did their work. They initially had a certain amount to get the Metro District off, and then they had an update 5 years later, and we know sort of broad numbers there. We also kind of just have done a lot of this modeling work, saw what it is going to have to be contracted out. I mean, it's not going to be done by EPD staff.
Is this something that will be done every 5 years?
It will be.
So we can look for a $3 million every 5 years?
Well, I think that and I need to, this is not all that would be required. I think next year we look at these trends, we've broken it up over some years, so I don't think this is, you got to, I don't know, Mary, do we have estimates for post these years? I think this year is a 2 million number. I think next year would be a
1.6 over 500 in the base. So
Well, how does your organization trust and verify your vendor? Or if they give you a figure, you just accept it?
well, we will bid the studies out.
Okay.
And generally, we have done a number of these studies, particularly with state water plants. So our modelers who frequently do this have a fair amount of expertise in estimating what this work's going to cost.
Representative Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You really just asked the questions I wanted to, and you answered them, I think. I'll ask one more about the water councils. You've got funds in here to continue the water council's work for this coming year, and do you anticipate it going forward subsequent years?
Sure. So last year, this body added enough money to help us maintain the work of the councils. And so that's in the base, so to speak, and we planned that to continue. And it was a $500,000 number composed of a certain amount for each council to kind of have their meetings and fund a portion of an FTE for somebody to sort of continue to monitor. Once the councils pass these best practices, implementation of those is going to be required by local ordinance, and so there's an implementation tracking piece of that dollar. And then we created a grant program, a competitive grant program with the other $150,000 of that $500,000 that we hope to do every year, which because there are data requests by council that are different, and those are stacked up
exactly
like this. And so what we have done, and we can get you more information on the awardees for this last round, but we won't get the whole stack done, but this is one way in which and there's a local match required. So one of the communications we made based on the sort of maintenance funding for the councils, not the updates to the plan, but the maintenance, was to say, look, the state's participating here, but there's a need. I mean, if locals, you really, and there is a great buy-in, as many of you know, at the local level. And the best way we designed to have that local skin in the game, so to speak, was to allow them to say, okay, in the lower Flint or the Ocmulgee or one of these different councils, our issue is unique. You funded this general stuff, but we'd like to participate here, and we're going to do so with a local match. They kind of know what they're buying, so to speak, and I think that's been well received.
I agree. Thank you. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I think that answered all my questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Chairwoman Smith?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. I want to point out something to our committee and just the history on what this is. Back in 2001 is when we began this process in earnest, and it took 8 years, 2008 and 2009 is when we put these into place. And the fear of everyone, once we could agree to it, was that it would not be maintained, and that would have been contrary to the purpose that every region in the state determined, and it's based on economic forecasts, it's based on population, and it's also based on your water resource, the quality and the quantity. And if we as a state did not invest our revenues in that, we would be hurting all our areas around the state, because those are the three things that are most important. So I have had my fears through the years that this might not be funded, and I'm really relieved to see that there is a push moving forward to do this. And as to the water council, it's like anything else in life. Those who serve on it, if they're willing to serve, they'll have great councils. If there's not as much attention to that, then I think those regions will have a weaker voice. So I think it's one of the most critical policies we've done as a state. And I know it's several arrows in your battle against all the different laws, water conflict hearings. So I want to thank you for fighting to get this money in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for that clarification and history. Proceed, please.
Okay, and then, so if we head to Hazardous Waste Trust Fund 33.4, the governor's recommendation is for an add of $630,000, which we tried to provide sort of a list of sites. A little history here, we all know it well. The trust funds have been a topic of this body the last couple of years, and will be this year with the Solid Waste Trust Fund. And the governor has been helping us sort of ease our way out. As you know, the trust funds pay for staff within EPD, but they also pay for local reimbursements to counties and municipalities to clean up those old municipal unlined landfills. And then, as was the design of the trust fund on the hazardous waste side, they're there to clean up abandoned sites. And so, with the Great Recession, we leaned on these trust funds and have been kind of easing our way back out. Now we're at a place, and this is what I try to do in describing where we are, where we've caught up on local government reimbursements.
I'm sorry, we are caught up?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
and we are able to maintain our program. And now what's left undone are sort of this backlog of abandoned sites. And so we provided a list by priority of the 64 sites out there, tried to prioritize them by risk to health and human safety, discharge to streams, some of those things. And I think with this 630, we're able to clean up the East Point site there in Fulton, and it's the Channon property. So that's how you get to that number, and it does represent another increase in that, in working our way back on these trust funds. So we appreciate it greatly.
The only concern I had, and I spoke earlier with someone about that, was I applaud when we're catching up during economic lean times. We have to do what we have to do. I personally would like to see and like to have a list of those sites.
Sure.
If you come to us every year, at some point we have the right to say, well, when are we caught up? And without knowing what the total figure we're starting with it, then we don't know the appropriateness. Do you have a plan on all the sites being cleaned up within 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? That's the kind of discussion that I'd like to have, for us to have a logical plan that we can move forward with.
That's great, Mr. Chairman. We can tell you we've estimated the total liability on those sites at about $58 million for the 64 sites. Having a little experience in these hazardous waste cleanups, the timing of that cleanup and how you get those contractors in place and get total sign-off so you can take them off the HSI listing and put them back to productive use is a little bit more complex question, but we'd be happy to provide.
Is there a dollar breakdown? Let's suppose that we took a pie with that dollar that's collected.
Sure.
Where X amount of that pie goes to local, for X amount goes to administration, X amount goes to sites. Do we have one of those that we know for incoming revenue in the future?
I can get you that. I don't think I have
and then
it with me today.
Then we can break it down and see if it's the best thing we can do. Any questions from members of the committee? Anything else you'd like to add? Solid waste?
Not on hazardous
Okay.
waste. Solid Waste Trust Fund 33.8, there's a ad there recommended that includes sort of two parts. Part of that would be $120,000 that represents two positions for inspections. You know, around as we managed through the recession, we really had an example out there that we didn't mean to have, but we had a couple of our district offices that didn't have a tire inspection there, and we saw the value of prevention, or in the inverse, when we didn't have that position filled, we saw the problem that comes without getting around, and so that a lot of times in the Solid Waste Trust Fund, the conversation, and my board asked me this a lot, which is, shouldn't we just be spending more money on cleanups themselves? And we want to do that. Certainly that's an expectation from the trust funds, that we clean up these abandoned sites. And the second ad gets at roughly half of the known tires themselves out there. The additional $735,000.
It gets at half of the tires.
Half of what equates to about half of the tires.
So we can anticipate that one more time, and that would totally clean it up?
Well, let me just tell you this: the number always is moving, and frankly, if you go back before we were even cleaning any up in the bad part of the recession, the number of known sites went down because nobody was telling us about them. The minute we started cleaning them up, the sites went from 300,000 known tires worth of cleanup to 1.2 million. And so as we are cleaning up, we are going to continue to get that. Hopefully, it's not an order of magnitude off of the trend we see here, but of the known sites in-house, it does represent about half of that. And then just to finish the point on prevention, what we did see is, you know, there's a real value to the program, to getting around and doing those inspections and that presence. And when you don't have that presence, it's easy for that to slack off. And, you know, it costs you $3 a tire to clean one up. And it's hard to prove a negative and put a dollar figure on what the value of preventing one from being illegally dumped in the beginning. But I will submit to you it's less than $3 a tire. So we're glad to get monies that we would recommend go into those to fill those two places where we had not had a district offices where we hadn't had a presence.
Chairwoman Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just to add to this conversation, our legislature last session passed a bill that clearly defined what used tire was,
Right.
what a scrap tire was, so we hope that that's going to help us a little bit with further identifying that problem.
Thank you. And I just, because of the wording, I want to micromanage the two positions a little bit.
Sure.
Just for clarity of language. Increase funds for two positions and operating expense. The only reason why that's a flag, someone made my attention, well, if we're hiring two people at $18,000 a year, that'd be $36,000, and then you'd
Right.
have $84,000 in operating expense. Can you break down what that, and we know that's not the case. I'm using the ridiculous to prove a
Right.
point. So do we know what that operating expense is in that amount?
The operating expense is very minimal. I think it's like telecommunication and a tiny bit of rent. I think we.
But can you get that to my office?
We can absolutely.
And listen, a lot of people are asking this committee for personnel that's been lost over the last few years, and if you're going to tell us a personnel cost is $57,000 a year, we want to know that it's $57,000 a year.
Sure.
So if you'll get that to us. Any other questions from members of the committee? Great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Department of Administrative Services, and that's page 6 for members of the committee. Give us just a second. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Sid Johnson. I'm Commissioner of the Department of Administrative Services. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm here in support of the Governor's recommendation for the DOAS budget. I would like to review a couple of items on your tracking sheet, if that's appropriate. If you look down on item 12.4, risk management, we have asked to increase funds to the liability trust fund of $5.5 million, and we have a corresponding decrease in the unemployment insurance trust fund of a similar amount. We knew we had some needs in the liability trust fund. We came with a proposal to OPB to make it cost neutral, and so that's that. What I'd like to do is you've got a handout and walk you through the need for the 5.5 on the liability. You've got a handout, risk management financial projections. The bottom graph is liability and tort trust funds. You can see the black line is the cost of the program, and you can see that the cost since FY13 are fairly level. You see the green line, which is the premiums, are less than what the costs are, and those have risen slightly over the last 3 years or 2 years. And you see the result of that is that the red line, the trust fund balance, has decreased. We're at a point where we need a little bit more premium to keep the trust fund from bouncing off the bottom. And if you'll turn the page, top of the second page, you see the unemployment trust fund. You see kind of an opposite picture there where the black line, the costs have gone down. The economy has gotten better. Unemployment benefits have run out. Costs have come down. The premiums have followed suit and have come down a little bit. At the same time, the fund balance after hitting bottom in FY10 have risen to a reasonable level. We feel like reducing premiums to offset the increase in the liability are appropriate at this point. And then the last page there is just a review of what I've just described. So we want to go from, in the liability, the third column, FY14 revenue of 26. We want to increase that to the 31.5 in FY15. And similarly, unemployment will go down to 10 million, and you see the resulting estimated projected trust fund balance at the end of 15 by taking those two actions. I'll be glad to answer any questions about the trust fund.
Questions from members of the committee? You said risen to a reasonable level in regards to the trust fund balance in 2015. And when I look at it via your graph from 2010, what is reasonable in terms of an increase every year? If I look at less than 2 million on the left-hand side and up to 10 million in a 14-year, I get is that the kind of growth that we continue to expect in the next 4 years?
Not in this fund.
Okay.
No, and that's
Okay,
why we're
why not?
comfortable. That's why we're comfortable reducing the premiums, because costs are coming down, so we feel like the trust fund balance that is now in place would be enough to cover any.
So next year, this red line you would show me would probably be not so much this, but a little
It
bit
should
more.
be a little flat.
Okay, good.
Yep.
I like flat lines. Yeah, except if it's my personal portfolio. Right.
That's right. Well, that's page 4, sir. Your
Okay,
portfolio.
yeah. Very good. All right, any questions from members of the committee?
All right.
All
The
right,
only
go
other
ahead.
item I'll bring your attention to is state purchasing, 193. That's a common issue that's been spread across the enterprise of state government for ERS increase and salary adjustments.
Any other questions? Commissioner, we appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody here from the Aviation Authority? All right. Department of Driver Services. Page 9 for members of the committee. Y'all doing all right?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
With your permission, I'm going to skip through the merit-based pay, the ERS, and the teamworks, and just go straight to the true ads. The first one of those would be we're working towards, hopefully, having a facility on Fort Benning. As I'm sure you know, through BRAC and other measures, and Fort Benning becoming a center of excellence, they have a major increase in troop volume there. Right now we have a facility in Columbus that's really in Midland. They pull off of there to go to that facility. What we'd like to do is get onto the base. The base population is around 108,000, as I understand it today. This would serve active duty, reserves, dependents. Whoever can get onto the base could go to this facility. So that's what the 125 $378 is for annual recurring cost there. That was 20.2.3.
Any questions on that, members of the committee? Is that an on-base facility only?
Yes, sir. That's the goal. If we can't get on the base, Mr. Chairman, then this would not be spent.
Okay. Have you already negotiated whether you can get on the base or not?
We have not committed $1 or signed one contract. What we have done is just talk to the base, and the base chain of command would like for us to be there. But as I understand it from the feds, any unit that wants to be on a base now has to go through the Army Corps of Engineers. So we're waiting on a verdict from the Army Corps of Engineers as to whether or not they will allow the DMV to come onto the base. But there are other states, Virginia, Arizona, Texas, other states.
When do you
have
expect to
DMVs.
get that decision on whether you're going to be allowed to come on the base?
Mr. Chairman, it could be tomorrow, or it could be in 6 months.
I just
in
don't know.
anticipation of 6 months, why wouldn't we not fund this and then backfill it in the amended if you did get on the base?
Sir?
I'm just trying to figure out why would we fund something that we have no guarantee on? If something were to happen, which you would hope is good news, and you get on the base in 3 months, wouldn't it be easier for you to come in and say, we don't need 125 and this is a yearly figure, we only need 3/4 of it because we're only been on the base 3/4 of the time? Wouldn't that be easier?
Yes, sir. I'm sure we could do it that way. My hope is, though, that we can go ahead and get on. We've been waiting on a decision for them to tell us one way or another since 2013. Obviously, that's not even been that long, but since about November, December. So my hope is we're close. I just don't want to tell you a date and be wrong.
I understand.
And there's no timetable that I'm aware of on their end where they have to make a decision.
Representative Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we establish this on Fort Benning, that $125,000 is going to be at a minimum a reoccurring fee every year, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how many employees would that staff?
All right, if we go onto the base, what we anticipate is that we would run that center part-time. So this fee is to have 5 staff members, but it's really funding 50% of that staff because we don't expect to be open there 5 days a week.
Would those be staff that would be commuting from that Columbus Center or
Yes.
that Midland Center?
If we take the current staff out of Columbus and put them on the base, then we'll be hurting in both places probably. But so the plan is, yes, sir, to have them out of Columbus. And that's how we do our other part-time centers. Such as Blairsville, for example, is
Right.
pretty much run out of Blue Ridge.
Yeah. Given the fact that, I mean, that's going to be 100,000 people, servicemen, their families, is that going to be enough staff to be able to, if we're going to move on there and we're going to spend $125,000 to do it, I think we want to do a good job for them. So, I mean, is that going to be enough staff to be able to handle that load of service people? Because, you know, I went to a military school. I have a lot of friends that are still in there. They're in and out in a year, 18 months at Benning, and then they're gone somewhere else, Stewart, Fort Hood, all over the place. So I just want to make sure that that's going to be enough staff to fill the load.
It's our best guess. I hope so. I mean, what we can do as well is, you know, if we start struggling, maybe I feel like we really need some part-time, full-time examiners there because I anticipate a lot of out-of-state transfers. That's a little bit more of a complex transaction on our end. You know, maybe we could switch some of the full-time out for part-time and be able to get more actual work hours for the same dollar. But our estimate is that'll get us going.
And to follow up, one last question, Mr. Chairman, follow up on what the chairman was saying. There's no idea of when they could approve this. They didn't give you, we'll let you know by July. It's just we'll get back to you.
No, sir. They don't give us a number. The last conversation I had was something to the extent of we're ready to make a decision, but the Corps of Engineers isn't on Benning. You know, they're up in D.C. or wherever it is that they are. So I do know that the 2-star on the base is looking to have more work with the state of Georgia and more inner workings with us. And then I know that normally there's also a 1-star on Fort Benning, but that position is currently held by a bird colonel. And I know he's very aware of this project. He would like for us to be there, but bottom line is it gets out of their hands until the Corps of Engineers decide. So we're welcomed by the folks that are there. So my hope is that they're pushing, if they're able to, the Corps of Engineers so it can be sooner than later.
Mr. Chairman, one last question.
Yes.
Just the logistics side of me has this question. Did the majority of the folks who are on Fort Benning right now go to that Columbus branch to exercise, get driver's license, driving tests for their teenage children? Is that the branch they use the most?
Yes, sir.
Is it one of our higher volume branches?
It is. It's our so we have 65,
right,
including the part-time, and it's the 14th busiest.
So this will actually reduce the load then. We're not just gonna spread the load between two different service centers.
It should reduce the load, but from looking at some of the projections, Columbus continues to grow.
Right.
If you look at Phoenix City says because of BRAC, I think it's supposed to increase their economic input by 20 to 35 million, and all these other folks moving in, and then the folks who support the units moving in. So I anticipate that as Fort Benning continues to grow, the Columbus area is going to grow, and and hopefully we can keep up with that projected volume.
And is Columbus a full-time facility right now?
Yes, sir.
And it will continue to be, even though we will be shuffling staff
Yes,
out
sir.
to Fort Benning?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairwoman Smith?
Sorry.
That's okay. Have you been approached about an office in Colquitt, Georgia?
No, sir, but I've been approached very vaguely about what's right below Bainbridge, but not Colquitt. I'm in Colquitt, but part-time.
Right. You're
Yes,
in
sir.
I'm sorry. You're in Colquitt part-time, and you've
Yes,
been
sir.
approached about one in Decatur County in Bainbridge.
Yes, sir.
And why have you been approached on that? Fill me in a little bit. I'm just getting this put on my radar screen.
I really don't know any of the details beyond that. There was a welcome center there that's no longer open.
So they have a facility already in place that you could use.
I don't know because I haven't seen it, and our facilities folks haven't seen it. But yes, sir, that's the belief is perhaps there's something that wouldn't require a lot
Do you
of
know
work.
when your facility folks will see it?
No, sir. I still their city manager is Chris Hobby, and he and I have had a couple of conversations. But he and I have got to find a time we can sit down and talk a little bit more and talk about what he has and what our needs are.
If you've got an issue in terms of access, and you're looking at a Columbus, which I think you're fairly looking at, which is to take the pressure off of Midland or Columbus and try to provide access somewhere else.
Yes, sir.
I would think that intellectually, that concern of constituent service would be relevant everywhere in the state. And I'm sure you
Absolutely. Yes,
and
sir.
so I would hope that you would look at the needs of that facility and see if there's a potential match. I'm just starting to get a little
Yes,
bit
sir.
more of that kind of stuff on my radar
We're
screen.
taking that one absolutely seriously. No doubt about it.
And there's a part of me that goes, we could use those 125 funds and just go straight into Bainbridge and wait on the feds, right?
Yes, sir. I don't know what it would cost me to build out Bainbridge.
All right. If you can get me that, I'd appreciate it.
What you think we need for Bainbridge?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir. I'll get that to
And-
you.
and the only
I don't
reason
know.
why-
It won't be
if-
immediate, though,
if-
because
if-
I got to get down there.
I understand. Well, and that's kind of my point. If you're sitting there going, we need to get together and we need to sit down and talk, and I've been hearing about this for a couple of months, and we hadn't sit down and talk, you know what I'd encourage you to do? Sit down and talk. I'd say that to anybody. It's just, that's probably the right thing to do.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. 20.2.4 is the 53 part-time. We went through that one before, and I'd be glad to answer any questions on that or keep going with the next center.
Well, the obvious question there is, this to me, and we talked about it with some members on the committee, is this a classic example of the feds wave something in front of us, get us to bite on it, and then every year we're left paying for it after that? Is this going to be a reoccurring?
I
Probably.
personally don't feel that's one of them. We don't have.
But you know what I mean?
I know.
Let me-
Yes, sir. That's
we
why I'm
talk about
thinking
that all the
before I
time.
answer you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. There's the other thing about the other federal grants we have that fund positions. So federal motor carrier funds some CDL positions, for example. That's been funded for a while. I expect that would continue. I don't have any reason to believe that's going to be cut off. And this money was money that was set up under Homeland Security type of thing. And so that's how we were able to use it. And I think it was more of, hey, we've lost 169 positions, and we're dying out here. Will the feds let us use that money to try this part-time project and see if we can get it up and running, and would it be successful? And it was. So I don't think that's one where they dangled something in front of us.
Is this something you expect just to be reoccurring every year at the cost of $700,000?
Yes, sir, I do. I feel
It's
like
not going to go away. We need to just get used to it.
yes, sir. I do not anticipate it going away. I feel like our part-time model is
Okay.
actually serving us well, and I
Okay.
plan to continue on that model.
All right, Chairman Smith, again.
It won't turn off now.
Keep hitting that where I can keep calling on her just for fun. Okay. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry. Last one.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, 20.2.5 is funds for the Atlanta Center. If you all have been there, you know the condition. This is pieced together 5 trailers back in '06, And we've gotten to the point, first of all, it's just not the safest place. We constantly run homeless people off of up under it, who are living up under it, sleep there, sleep on our walkways and our porch there. But what we're really looking at there as well is the age of these trailers is two things. One, it's worn out and it's expensive. We spent $29,000 over the last 3 years just maintaining it. It currently needs a new roof. It currently needs 2 more HVAC units. The tiles are buckling where the trailers are pieced together. It's just coming apart. And then the other thing is, this is our busiest location in the state, and it doesn't even do driving tests. And so what we got to do is get into a bigger location so we can actually manage the volume. And so that's what we're trying to do is go somewhere in the city limits. I think is good, or at least we need to be on a MARTA train line. So that's part of the goal where we do move. And right now, I think from the Capitol or the Twin Tower station that we currently are sort of accessible to MARTA. But this place, it only has seating for 125, and there's a lot more people in that lobby than 125 almost every day.
Next.
So we're struggling.
Okay, let me shuck it down to the cob. You're asking for $300,000 because you already have a facility?
Yes, sir. We have
Okay,
a
and how
facility.
much bigger is the facility than what you currently have?
So right now, I don't know the square footage of those 5 trailers, but where we're headed, first of all, we don't have a place yet. Again, if there's an RFP out, but what we are asking for is 10,000 square feet. That would accommodate the volume. But again, if you don't fund it, no contract has been signed. There's no obligation. We're good. We walk away.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm confused. You don't have a facility.
Oh, a new facility. I'm sorry. I thought you meant the current place.
You currently have a facility.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you're asking for $300,000 because you're moving,
Yes, sir.
but you don't know where you're moving to.
No, sir. There's currently an RFP out on the street. So here's what happened. If you want me to talk about the RFP.
No, I'm trying to figure out how do you know if you don't know where you're going. I'm trying to figure out how you know how much
How
your
do we
rent's
know
going to
what's
be.
gonna- Yes, sir. So here's how we know. State Properties Commission does a study. We know the area we need to be in. I believe we're going to be within, no matter what, 5 miles of where we currently are. So they do a study, square footage, whatever market value of square footage in that area is, and that's how they create the estimate of what the cost would need to be.
Just have fun with me. So
Yes,
if
sir.
this committee said, you know what, we believe that you can find it for $200,000 instead of $300,000, what would you do?
Well, the current is $300,000 amortized over 15 years, so it comes out to $5.1 million. Whatever that math would be, I don't know. I guess we would try to see if we could get into a facility for that price, but it might would kill it. I just don't know.
Okay. Representative Allison.
Do you have a current lease on the place we're at? Or is it state-owned?
It's state-owned, and we pay GBA $39,000 in rent to be where we are today.
I hope that's a year, not a month. That's $39,000 a year we pay.
Yeah.
And the GBA know that you're thinking about relocating?
Oh, yes, sir.
To $300,000 a year?
Yes, sir. So what happens is I should have included that part. It's $300,000 plus, let's just call it 30. That's what the cost would be. Times, I think that's how I got to the 5.1 million. 300 plus the 39 that we pay, so let's call it 340 times 15. I believe that's 5.1 million. Now, what that would include as well is you got to do a 15-year lease. This is my understanding. I'm not a building expert.
Oh, Lord.
You have to do a 15-year lease in order to help whoever your landlord is to recoup the cost. So that's why it's not less than 10. Actually, that was the reason for it had to be rebid, because it was whatever the term was. It was less than 15.
I'm just trying to think if my mortgage was $39,000 a year, what kind of house I'd get if I went up to $300,000 a year
Man,
on a 15-year mortgage.
Yeah, I tell you.
I'd sit there and go, sweet. Just, I mean, that's me being
I
oversimplified.
understand, but understanding, the
And if I
The
told
facility
the
we're in now
realtor
is
to go
bad.
find me something in that price range, I'd be the most popular guy in the real estate market.
yes, sir.
All right. Any other questions from members of the committee? Chairwoman Smith.
Thank you. Is the question I have here is talking with this, trying to understand how communities work to try and get drivers and departments in there, drivers departments in the community. Do some of our cities and counties offset the cost for you to live there? Is there a skin in the game type scenario going on? Or is it all strictly state costs?
Good question.
It runs the gamut. There are some communities like yours that love having us there and help us pay the lease. And then there are others that don't. And in those places that don't, we get a little bit stuck, I think, because we got a huge population there and we got to serve them. And I think most communities are trying to help us and provide something, but we definitely pay a lot of rent as well.
Please.
So in essence, in a way, you are an economic development project for communities when you bring staff in and people in and things such as that.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is there a nearby, so you're determined by your location as well as by the need. Those two things drive where you go.
Yes, ma'am. I think there are a lot of things, including, accessibility and whatnot. But yes, ma'am, those are big ones. Where's the population? Where is their availability? What's the ability to get to us, such as in Atlanta, being on the MARTA line? Things of that nature, yes, ma'am.
It's just interesting to me, and I wish there were a way to make this point clearer to people who are lucky enough to have one of these services in their community, that there are, in fact, some communities that value your presence there. And it seems like we can help offset costs. There really is a mutual benefit is where I'm going with this.
I totally agree.
It's a one-way track. I'm curious as to why it's one-way track.
I totally agree, and I can't speak for some of these communities, but I guess a nice way of saying it is we certainly don't go in there and say, well, you've had this here forever, and you could assume it's going to be here forever. I think we do a good job of trying to fight back and get funding. And if we have a facility in a certain community and something goes wrong, we do everything we can to. Let's say the AC unit breaks down, it's going to cost $10,000 to fix it. We fight hard to get that community to fund it. At the same time, there are some communities that I'm sure they're glad we're there, but some express it better than others.
Mr. Chairman, that's just something I want to keep out on our radar. I'm curious to see how that works around the state.
It's a great
Yes,
point.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't mean to keep beating a dead horse here, and forgive me, I'm just a country lawyer.
Simple country lawyer.
That's right. I want to go back to this 300,000 because there's just something that's not adding up for me. Right now we have a facility that's old, outdated, causing constant repair that we pay $39,000 a year for, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I believe your figure was you had to pay $29,000 in the last couple of years just to keep the thing repaired. Is the $300,000 you're asking for, is that just the rent, a 1-year rent for a new facility in Fulton County? Or is that moving fees, rent, everything else that is included in that? 'Cause I'm trying to figure out what the square footage we would be paying for a 10,000 square foot facility in Atlanta.
That would include the build out and everything on the inside as well.
What would you anticipate that the yearly rent would be after the build out? Have they given you a price per square foot? Are we looking at 100K? Are we looking at 200K? Are we looking at 50?
I think I'd have to get SPC to tell me that part of it.
Mr. Chairman, I guess what my concern is if I knew what that new value of that rent could be, we could see if this is cost effective. Because the only concern I would have is
$3,000 a square foot.
yeah,
Okay.
that would be my concern.
Yeah. Now on that, I would want to bring you back whatever that detail is that State Properties has, because when you do the math like that, I don't think that's the math is correct.
Yes,
I know the math is correct.
oversimplifying. I know. I mean,
But
I think what the
there's more
community's
in
having
there.
trouble with is you got a place for $39,000 and you're going to $300,000,
And I know a lot of that's built
and
up.
you don't know where you're going.
Right. And I understand that, but we're going from 5 trailers from '06 on state property to a location that's going to be more than twice the size. My budget director's been kind enough to remind me that the current trailers, all pieced together, are 5,000 square feet. So we're going to double the size, get a build out, get parking, hopefully get enough space to actually do driving tests. So it's going to be a vast improvement, and then also be able to service the demand of the
I respect that, and I have no problem with that, because obviously up in Blairsville, ours is in a trailer, and I have no problem with that. And I obviously want our employees to be safe, and I want it to be in an area that's good. What I'm having problems with is the math is, would we be better to bond a capital project with GBA's authority to build something at the spot we have? Because you're talking about a 15-year commitment, you said, that this committee would have to basically, once you make that decision, we are bound by your decision for 15 years at whatever square foot you lock in at. And that's why I would like to know what we're talking about in monthly rent, because you add that by 15 years, it might just be easier to do some kind of capital project that we work with GBA on. I don't know, but that would be a concern.
Well, my understanding, and I don't know any of the details of this other than the 2 sentences I'll be able to relate to you now. My understanding is that State Properties Commission did consider that, not only consider some kind of, doing a bond for this project, but also the current property. And for whatever reason, there's some other vision or something for that location. I don't know what it is, but I do know that what you just articulated was articulated above my pay grade, or where they make these building decisions, and this is deemed a better decision for the total vision of the state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, sir. Thank you.
I look forward to us continuing the discussions in my office on just a variety of various issues.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Be
you.
glad to.
Department of Banking and Finance. Page 8 for members of the committee. Y'all doing all right?
Doing great, thank you.
Good, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm Kevin Hagler, Commissioner of the Department of Banking and Finance, and I'm joined today by Deputy Commissioner for Administration, Tracy Whitesides. Looking at the tracking sheet, all the items for our department are the merit items that the Governor's Office had recommended. The only one that is different is the 14.3.3, where the department had asked the Governor's Office to provide some additional funding for our most key fundamental positions of the department, the financial examiner and senior financial examiner positions. We talked briefly about that at the previous meeting, but those are our boots on the ground in terms of the examinations that we do for our banks. These are not supervisors, they're not management, they are the examiners that are doing the analytical work, the loan reviews, the full report of exam. These are the fully trained folks and the folks that are capable of taking on the most complex and difficult examinations. Our turnover in these job classes in calendar year 2013 was 23.4%, which is just staggering. Statewide, I think turnover is around 17%, which is considered quite high. So it's gutting our department and our ability to have continuity going forward. I'm at a loss when it comes to talking about how our salaries and these ranges match up with other state agencies here in Georgia, because as we talked before, I deal mainly with Federal Reserve and FDIC and those folks. And I'm not asking our salaries to be competitive dollar for dollar with those agencies. Federal government, that doesn't match. We look at more of a package in terms of quality of life, work-life balance, having the ability to make decisions locally. One thing I would offer up as a comparison is North Carolina's banking department, because we match up statistically well with them in a number of areas. And I'll run through that very quickly if you'll indulge me. North Carolina regulates 51 banks, which includes a large one in BB&T. Total assets under supervision, $234 billion. Georgia Department of Banking, 184 banks. We have SunTrust, which is comparable to BB&T, and our total assets is 249. So I think we're pretty good peers, except that we have 3 times the number of community banks when you look at it like that. Also, I want to note that we also have a portfolio of 54 credit unions that we regulate, and North Carolina has a completely separate division that handles that. North Carolina has 68 examiners, and we have 62. So we have a good bit more workload, similar demographics. But for our financial examiner positions, you know, our lowest paid financial examiner is $42,000 a year. Theirs is $67,000 a year. Their lowest paid senior financial examiner is $102,000 a year. Ours is $47,000. So we're not asking, again, for federal pay levels. We're not even asking for North Carolina's pay grades. We're asking that those positions be bumped to $50,000 and $60,000 respectively. And I think those.
How many different states did you get those kind of comparative numbers from, or did you just exclusively get North Carolina's?
North Carolina was the nearest match from what we do, but we looked at the southeastern. We also took Texas and New York. And when you look at banking departments from one state to another, they vary wildly. I know we've been in the press for a number of years for all the wrong reasons, but we still are considered a premier state in terms of banking because we have folks like SunTrust and Synovus, United Community Bank, those folks here.
Who did that data for you?
We belong to the Conference of State Bank Supervisors, so this is you know, data that's already provided.
Yeah, that's nothing we had to pay for?
Correct, correct.
Okay. Can you provide us with that?
We can. We can give you supplemental information to go with that. Also, what I would like to say is the ask that we have today is very similar to what was granted in 07 by SPA when they adjusted certain salaries across the state range. They did do a study of their own. They moved these 2 positions to 50 and 60, and this was 5 years ago. So, again, we kind of came to the same conclusions, but you know, they did a study, and we're just using industry data that we're privy to.
If I ask you what percentage rating pay increase is this for people, what would you tell me?
It varies because we have folks that are different spots across the board. And I won't sugarcoat it. It's for some folks that have been on for a while, that would be a $2,000, $3,000 raise. We have
Which
some
would be
folks,
what percent, do we know? Because you said they'd been on for a while.
Yeah, now, whatever, let's see, like James would be.
You got time to get us that, if you can get us that information.
But I guess what I probably want to make is there will be some that will have a pretty high percentage because they are recently promoted, and it's going to, they've got time to, got a position to make up.
For me personally, I have great concerns, and this isn't just about you, but this is about a lot of other agencies, that they're giving pay raises, and then as they're getting ready to walk out the door with retirement, and they tell us it's for entry level. So, I mean, there's a part of me that almost, and you're not the only one, I almost want to sit there and go, where is it going specifically? If you got a problem at your 42,000 turnover, it shouldn't be, this pay raise should be substantial at the person that's been there a long time to make them at 92,000 a year. And if you can't provide me that, that's what I'd like to see.
We're very sensitive to that. We're talking about folks that have been on for 5 years or less. So retirement is nowhere near in the future.
So if you give me that breakdown of length of time and what their salaries are going from and to, then that'll work.
Absolutely.
Any questions from members of the committee? Anything else?
That's it for us.
Thank you so
very
much. And we'll wait for that information.
Okay.
Thank you. Secretary of State, how are you, sir? The gentleman from Athens is going to be excited, he hopes, about tomorrow and National Signing Day.
I hope we are celebrating tomorrow. Good to see you all.
Good to see you. For members of the committee, that'll be page 21.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of housekeeping things real quick. Want to just thank you and some of your committee members that served on the study committee for our licensing division. We appreciate the interest and working relationship we had with you all this summer as we went through that, and just wanted to thank you again for that. Also wanted to thank you and this committee for helping us in the amended budget, dealing with the new elections calendar and our GTA billing because of the election cycle getting moved up into this fiscal year. and for helping get the date change legislation passed so early in the session. That's been very helpful for us as we're now preparing for the primary, which is going to be earlier than I guess any of us have ever seen here in Georgia. So we are, like you guys with the session, we're in a very compressed time frame for getting ready for the primary. So I just wanted to thank you all for that help as well. On the 2015 budget, we are just grateful we do not have a cut. We're thankful to the governor for that. Hopefully you all will see fit to just leave our budget alone. We are, it's really the first time in 4 years that I've not had to really be planning on who it is that I'm going to lay off, even though I know I have more work to do. So we're very thankful for that. We're also appreciative of the merit-based pay raises. We are just starting to kind of work on that plan. One of the things that we had actually presented to the governor when we did our budget presentation to him is when you look at the employees that we have our executive directors and then, kind of our front office positions, and then really most of the agency we have are in very low salary ranges. And I think I mentioned this in the mid-year presentation that if we get a cut, it hurts a lot because we lose a lot of people. If we get an add, it can help a lot because we can employ a lot of people. But most of our folks, on the front lines making that, $20,000 to $35,000 or $40,000 range. So, those people would be very appreciative of the merit-based raises, especially as they've, been.
Mr. Secretary, where do you need the most help? Would it be in the call center? Would it be in the inspector category?
Yes, sir. I was going to mention that toward the end because I didn't want to get into all the figures because I know I've shared with your office and certainly the governor and the Senate as well our request that some of this was spurred on by the governor asking us questions, but I think our immediate need, the quickest way you could help the Secretary of State's office is with call center people. One of those numbers was a $190,000 figure to hire 5 additional call center operators. And that's really, Mr. Chairman, where we have been getting killed. Last year, I think we had like over 900,000 phone calls, and we only answered a little over half of those. So we've had extremely high call volumes, and just it's not because we don't have good technology or good people. We just don't quite have enough of them. Hopefully, as I mentioned in the amended budget, some of that will go by the wayside here in the next 2 or 3 months when we get completed with the secure and verifiable document check on licensing renewals. We probably, out of 500,000 people, we got about 30 or 40,000 of those left to do. And then once we finish that, we'll have all the people that are currently on our rolls, we'll have that process completed. We will not have to do that again, thanks to y'all's help changing that last year in statute. We'll still have to do the new licenses, which is a little more work, but we can manage that. So hopefully in 3 to 4 months, that will subside. That creates a lot of phone calls in the agency, so that'll help us with part of our problem. But we still, if y'all do find a few dollars floating around, we could certainly use a few more folks to answer.
You mentioned the 190 on the call center for 5 people. The investigators, is that a salary position that is pretty much consistent? In other words, an investigator's salary-wise, or according to what they're investigating, it may cost you a little bit more with a certain skill set?
No, normally it's pretty consistent. There has been some talk from some of the licensing boards saying, hey, we'd like to have our own investigator. We'd like to have somebody with this level of experience. We have one position right now. It's not an investigator, but it's a nursing position that is inspecting, I believe, facilities, educational facilities. The salary we are offering, we can't hire anybody because we can't compete with the other academic institutions.
I think Chairman Parrish brought that to my attention. If you can get me a white paper on that one specific hire.
Okay. We had actually had the nursing association we met with them the other day. That's one of the things they specifically asked for. But there could be a position on the investigative side where if we wanted to hire a forensic something for a licensing, it may cost us, or probably would cost us more than what our people are doing. And we can do that We just, you know, have to have the money available to do it, and we're glad to do that.
Any questions for members of the committee? Representative Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, good to see you.
Yes, sir. Good to be here.
For as long as I have been on this committee, you have been coming to us and taking cut after cut after cut. And I know the economy was primarily responsible for that. I just want to say how impressed I am at your leadership over there to take those body blows year after year after year without complaint and making our state run. That being said, I do have a couple of quick questions.
Okay.
What do you anticipate the loss of revenue to the Secretary of State's department, given the fact that you're not going to be processing fees and renewal licenses for the dentist board? Do you have any idea what that number would be, just off the top of your head?
It's kind of a moving target, and Lori Smith may be able to answer that better than me. We did, you know, tell OPB we're definitely going to see a revenue drop this year for a couple of reasons. Obviously, we lost dental and pharmacy. As Chairman Reinders knows, at the licensing division, depending on who we're licensing in what year, you know, in an even year we license, you know, this many people in this many professions, and then in an odd year we do these, and that difference is about $4 million a year, isn't that right?
That 2-year cycle is $4 million, and then with dental and pharmacy, we had $3.7 million of lost revenue with that transfer.
We can get you the detail on those numbers too.
Now, when they were going to move, they were going to have their own employees, but I have heard the grapevine. I want to clarify this. Did y'all lose any employees who left Secretary of State's employ and went to work for this new board? I heard, even though I was told that wouldn't possibly happen, did it actually happen?
Well, it did, and you know, first, before I answer that question,
sure,
we're also grateful. You know, I mean, I think everybody knew where I was on that legislation last year. There's no need in rehashing that. But one of my points, and I appreciate the legislature's help with this, was that if they moved and the appropriation per license was taken away, it was going to adversely affect our office. We were going to have to lay off 20% of our people, and we were only losing 10% of our licensees. So I wanted to just tell you that we are grateful for that. But it was said, and I heard it in committee, that our folks, you know, weren't experienced enough to do that type of licensing. But the fact of the matter is, after the bill passed, that every one of the people that was working for us in dental and pharmacy got hired and went to DCH. You know, we certainly don't blame those employees. We're all for anybody bettering themselves, but that is what happened, which caused us to then have to, you know, reshift around our division, you know, replace those individuals,
and you're back at full staff now.
Well, I would hate to say full staff.
I understand. You're back to where you were before.
The positions that we are appropriated are working hard.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And thank you, Mr. Secretary of State, for the plug for the non-competitive state agreement, going from one agency to another. Any other questions from members of the committee? Sign a non-compete agreement.
That's a good idea.
You're right, yeah. Next time they say that, just
you
say.
Want me to co-sponsor that legislation?
Next time they say that committee, you just ought to turn around and go, yeah, I'll offer that as an amendment.
Yeah.
There's your poison pill.
Good thought.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Very good. We're adjourned.